So we know that the concept of the new Xbox Series consoles is continuity. It kind of deludes the concepts of exclusives and generations, but opens up an integrated ecosystem with flexibility to play where you are. Now, Series S, in particular, is the younger brother of the all-powerful Xbox Series X, and it brings us next gen at $299. Putting it in competition with Nintendo Switch. There's a lot of fear whether or not that is going to be a good purchase. Will it hold up in the future with more advanced and demanding games? Or will it hold back developers as they work on the next generation of games? Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, we ask the question, will you regret buying an Xbox Series S? Now, short answer, probably not. For what it is and how it's been put together, there's nothing to scoff at for $299. So let's start off with talking about resolution. For a while, resolution has been a selling factor. When the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 came out, it was HD games that were getting us in the door. With the Xbox One X and the PS4 Pro, it was 6 teraflops of graphical power, giving us 4K or at least better resolutions. But now Microsoft wants to sell you an Xbox that plays games at 1440p at 60 frames per second, although I kind of think it's probably going to be 1080p at 60 frames per second if we're going to be completely frank. Whatever it ends up actually being, isn't that kind of a step back? I mean, we were talking about 4K and 6 teraflops, and now we're talking 1440p and 4 teraflops. First off, I think it's important to note that we're talking a lot about marketing. To be frank, it's not just about raw numbers, but how those numbers work. What is the input-output pipeline? How fast can data be transferred? What is the bottleneck? In order to make that make sense, let's talk a little bit about teraflops. They're not really a good measurement to compare between different architectures, like the Xbox architecture and the PlayStation architecture. Now, from a hardware perspective, they're both x86 machines. However, understanding that the actual software base that both of these things are running on is significantly different and manipulate data differently, just talking about raw numbers isn't actually useful because chipsets, technology, and data pipelines are all complex and proprietary, especially this generation, where the promise that the PlayStation brings is a total revolution in data transfer. And second, at this point, resolution just doesn't really matter a lot. Like, we are talking relatively, to be completely clear. If you put out like a 640 by 480 game and tried to claim it was HD, that would matter. But aside from intentional aesthetics, nobody's really doing that kind of resolution anymore. Hell, nobody's even doing 720p. Like, if you put out a game in 720p at this point, people would be like, okay, why'd you do that? However, if you play on PC, you probably know that being able to run the game smoothly with visual fidelity, effects, shaders, textures, all that stuff on a resolution that is at least 1080p is more about balance, and having a package that runs smoothly is much better than having something that runs at 8K and has all the effects turned off. Given the choice between that and 1080p, 60 frames per second, everything turned on, yeah, duh. It's not even a competition in my head. PC gamers are often making purchase decisions like graphics cards, RAM, etc., based on monitor resolution as opposed to highest resolution they can get. Like, you want to attain a certain visual performance at the quality that your monitor can put out, whether that be 1080p, 1440p, or even 4K. I mean, if you're willing to spend a lot of money, you can get good performance on 4K. It's not like you can. And to be frank, with new technologies emerging, it's getting better all the time. But it's the scalability of PC gaming that provides this flexibility. And this is also why developers make sure that something runs at a lot of different resolutions. Resolution is just the size of the canvas your console is going to render out. It's a number of pixels that are a certain density, and it takes more work to draw this on a 4K size canvas, which has a lot more pixels packed into a lot less space than on a 1440p or a smaller 1080p one. Keeping this in mind, the Xbox Series X is the 4K version, and the S is the 1080p/1440p, maybe slightly wishful thinking on that second number, version. Now, a lot of people are worried that that scalability is going to hinder the potential of next-gen games because, well, let's just be clear, scalability is not really generally how console games work. Instead of making games scalable, like on the PC, console developers develop different versions of the game for different platforms. With, at very least, the Xbox platform, the architecture of the software is not different between the X and the S. It's the architecture of the hardware, meaning developing with scalability in mind will probably become the norm. Also, Microsoft is providing very friendly tools to make it seamless and painless. I have a lot of hopes it may also push console developers to release their games on PC, if that wasn't in the plan already, on account they're already developing in the Microsoft ecosystem. Understanding that you are of course not buying the powerhouse for $299, you're still going to be getting games that look quite good, just in a lower resolution than the powerhouse. Now, I do think there will be, of course, some obvious differences between games running on one platform and the other. That being said, I think it's fair to expect that given a lot of changes in data infrastructure and also capabilities of the graphics cards they're using, including ray tracing and things like that, Xbox Series S is going to look like a noticeable jump from the Xbox One. Yes, including the Xbox One X. And this is kind of the main stuff that comes to mind when you're saying, like, am I going to buy the $299 one or am I going to buy the more expensive one that's beefier? You're talking about graphics, video game graphics. It is worth noting that there are a couple of other points to consider though, like backwards compatibility and the fact that this is an all-digital console. So physical games, movies, they're right out. There's none of that. This is a console for somebody who's already went all in on digital, only uses Netflix, YouTube, Prime Video, etc. A person who only owns digital games, most likely has the Xbox Game Pass, which I think is probably the main reason for the existence of this console, to sell those Game Passes and get people onto the Xbox platform. As far as backwards compatibility, you will be able to play all the games playable on Xbox One, just as with the Series X, but without the improvements of the Series X. So you don't get the auto HDR, you don't get the texture patches, you don't get the 4K scaling. You'll be playing the Xbox One S version of all these games, and the only improvements you'll see are probably better and more stable frame rates, and resolutions in games with dynamic resolutions that are dependent on resources. You might see unlocked frame rates on games that don't reach their target frame rates, and this stuff is specifically because of the Series S's horsepower/data infrastructure, and not because of patches and improvements. The reasoning behind that is that the Series S is the successor to the One S, not the One X, so that's more what to expect, an extension and improvement on the One S experience. This is kind of where I think you start seeing a little bit of skepticism on my part. I think there's a lot of people who are going to start questioning, like, wait, so this doesn't really improve my experience on my existing games. The $500 console would, and basically the resolution is much higher. It's okay to expect more out of it. In terms of how this thing is going to look on your shelf, it is the smallest Xbox that we have seen. We knew that this thing was small, but when we actually got our hands on one, we were like, whoa, they were not kidding. This is extremely small, and it's also very dense. Like, this thing was engineered well. There's not a lot of empty space in between the components. And to be frank, that makes it feel like a quality product. You can put it on its side like any other console. It also has rubber feet, so you can put it in a vertical position. A big difference, I think, between this and the previous Xbox One X is that this thing has got the same kind of insane cooling stuff that the bigger brother, the Series X, has. There are just vents everywhere, on the sides, the bottom, and obviously the top with that speaker-looking grill, which, by the way, aesthetically really works for me. Controller is really similar to the Xbox One controller. Small, subtle changes. It actually feels like it fits a lot better in my hands. I'm guessing the grips were slightly redesigned because it feels like I'm not doing the clawing on the D-pad. But if you like the Xbox One controller, it's still compatible with the Series X and S, so you're not really stuck anyway. That is to say, the physical product is actually really nice. It comes in a slightly less premium package than the Xbox Series X comes in. The Series X comes in this black soft interior. It makes it feel like you're opening up like something of significant value, something that needs to be protected. And the Series S comes in a cardboard interior that, I mean, it makes it very obvious it's not the premium console. So the answer to will you regret buying an Xbox Series S is Well, what do you want out of it? Is your TV 1080p? Is it not a 4K TV? Huh. Do you play on your desk with a 1080p or a 1440p monitor? Another pretty convincing reason not to go for the full. But are you planning to upgrade to 4K, either TV or monitor? Do you only own physical games? Do you have $500 to spend on a console? I think these questions are kind of like the questions that you need to ask yourself to know if you'll regret the purchase or not. But if your answers to those are, I have a 1080p TV, I'm not going to upgrade to 4K, I've already moved to digital, I like spending less money, then no, you're absolutely not going to regret buying this thing. This thing is the machine for you. I think this is the type of video, however, where a comment section is particularly useful. Other folks, what are your preferences here? Did you buy the Series S? Do you think it was worthwhile to purchase? Are you feeling like it would have been better to wait and get the $500 one? Like maybe you were low on money this week and gonna have to wait a month or however long it takes to save up, I don't know. Or are you completely satisfied and this thing does exactly what you need it to do? Leave us a comment, let us know what you think. Also, if you haven't bought yet, let us know which you're gonna do. Of course, we're interested. We wanna know what everybody's doing because obviously we are planning our content for the future. Speaking of, if you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now is a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week, and the best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription. So click subscribe. Do not forget to enable all notifications. And as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at Falcon the Hero. We'll see you next time right here on gameranx.